The sky above Chicago was a heavy slate grey, sagging under the weight of autumn rain.
Cold droplets cascaded from the clouds like silver needles, slicing through the air and soaking the bustling city below. People hunched beneath umbrellas, ducked into coffee shops, or scurried under awnings, trying to escape the deluge. Victoria Langston stood at the curb outside the Midway Airport terminal, holding her designer trench coat tight around her. Her driver hadn't shown. Her assistant was unreachable. She glanced at her phone, no signal.
The storm must have knocked something out.
It was supposed to be a quick 2-day trip. A last-minute board meeting had been called to settle an internal dispute over the company's new acquisition. Nothing she couldn't handle. After all, she was Victoria Langston, the woman behind Langston Labs, a skincare empire that had grown from a college dorm project into a global brand. Her face had graced magazine covers, her quotes echoed in business schools. She was polished, powerful, and perpetually prepared. Until today. She decided to take a cab. The line was long, and her patience wore thin. That's when she saw a bus pulling up across the street. Impulsively, she dashed through traffic, high heels clicking against the wet pavement, and climbed aboard. She sat near the back, clutching her leather tote. The air inside the bus was thick with damp coats and worn-out perfume. She stared out the window, watching rain smear the cityscape into watercolor. Then it happened. A man boarded at the next stop. He didn't look dangerous, just another soaked figure in a hoodie. He moved quickly, sliding into the seat beside her before she had time to react. In a blink, his hand darted toward her bag. She gasped, clutched the straps, but he was faster. With a violent tug, he yanked it from her arms and sprinted off the bus into the rain. "Stop him," she shouted, standing, but no one moved. The driver glanced back, disinterested.
The door said shut.
Victoria stood frozen, heart pounding, watching her bag, and everything in it, disappear into the storm. She got off at the next stop. Her phone, credit cards, ID, hotel reservation, all gone. She had no umbrella, no backup plan, and no idea what to do next.
The rain intensifié.
Her coat was soaked, her makeup smudged, and the cold wind sliced through her as if punishing her for stepping out of her protected world. She wandered aimlessly through unfamiliar streets. She tried asking for help, first at a cafe, then at a hotel, but without ID or cash, no one would let her in. People looked at her with skepticism. Her drenched clothes, her disheveled hair, the absence of her usual poise, it all made her look less like a business mogul and more like a woman on the edge. She found a bench under a narrow awning and sat down, her mind spinning. How had her life unraveled so fast? One moment she was preparing to face the boardroom, the next, she was just another nameless face in the rain. Hours passed. The rain didn't let up. Her stomach growled, the last meal she'd eaten was on the plane. She felt weak, nauseated. She closed her eyes, trying to breathe through the panic, but the gnawing in her gut was relentless. That's when she heard a voice.
"Hey, are you okay?"
She opened her eyes. A girl, maybe 12 or 13, stood a few feet away. She was thin, with tangled dark hair tucked under a faded knit cap. Her oversized hoodie hung off her shoulders, and in her arms, she held a cardboard box. Victoria tried to smile. "I'm fine."
"Just waiting for Someone."
The girl looked unconvinced. She glanced at the box in her hands, then back at Victoria.
"I got some leftover stuff from the dinner."
They throw out bags of food sometimes. It's not bad, really. You hungry?
Victoria hesitated.
Everything in her upbringing, her pride, screamed no. But her body said yes. She nodded slowly.
The girl set the box down and pulled out a crumpled plastic bag.
Inside were a couple of cold, slightly squashed sandwiches and a small bottle of juice. She held one out. "You can have this one. I already ate." Victoria took it with trembling hands. The bread was soggy, the meat lukewarm, but in that moment, it tasted like salvation. She swallowed hard, the food catching in her throat. Tears stung her eyes, not from the cold or the shame, but from the unbearable contrast of it all. She had dined with presidents, toasted with celebrities, signed million-dollar deals over imported caviar. And now, a child who likely hadn't seen a clean bed in weeks was sharing her only meal. "I'm Victoria," she said quietly, wiping her mouth. "I'm Sam," the girl replied.
You got somewhere to go. Victoria shook her head.
Not really. Sam hesitated. My mom's sick, but we got space. It's just a trailer down by the canal, but it's dry. You can come, if you want. Victoria didn't know why she said yes. Maybe it was the hunger, the cold, or the sheer loneliness of the city that had once applauded her success. Or maybe it was the softness in Sam's eyes, a kindness too rare in the world she knew. They walked together through puddles and alleyways until they reached a line of battered trailers parked near an abandoned overpass. Sam opened the door to one, revealing a cramped but clean space with 2 mattresses on the floor, a flickering lamp, and a kettle on a hot plate. Sam's mother lay on one of the mattresses, coughing quietly, her face pale.
She's got arthritis real bad, Sam whispered. Can't work anymore.
I collect cans and stuff. We get by. Victoria nodded, unsure of what to say. She felt like a stranger in her own country, in a life she'd never imagined. That night, she curled up on the spare mattress, wrapped in a borrowed blanket.
The wind howled outside, rattling the tin walls.
She stared at the ceiling, thinking not of board meetings or hostile takeovers, but of sandwiches in plastic bags, of a girl named Sam, and of how quickly everything could change. It was the first night in years she fell asleep without checking her calendar. And the first in a long time she dreamed of something other than success. Morning arrived slowly, hidden behind a curtain of grey clouds. The rain had calmed to a misty drizzle, but the air was still cold, still heavy. Victoria opened her eyes to the unfamiliar ceiling, her body aching from the hard floor. Her blanket, thin and slightly damp, clung to her clothes. The faint smell of mildew clung to the walls of the trailer. She sat up slowly, blinking as the details of her surroundings returned. A cracked window, mismatched furniture, peeling wallpaper. It was a far cry from the marble floors and velvet drapes of her penthouse apartment in Manhattan. She looked across the room. Sam was still asleep, curled next to her mother, who murmured softly in her sleep, her hand clutching her knee.
Victoria stood, careful not to make a sound.
Her heels had long since broken, her feet were bare, swollen slightly from walking the night before. She tiptoed to the corner where her coat hung and wrapped it tightly around herself. In the dim light, she spotted a small bathroom and stepped inside. There was no mirror, just a foggy cracked shard of glass nailed to the wall. She leaned in, staring at her reflection. Her face looked older somehow, drawn and raw. The woman looking back at her wasn't a CEO or a public figure. She was just another lost soul in a forgotten place. A soft knock on the door startled her. You okay? Sam's voice was groggy. I'm fine, Victoria replied.
Just thinking.
Breakfast is whatever we can find. Sometimes the bakery leaves out day-old stuff. Victoria came out to find Sam slipping on a pair of worn-out sneakers. She was already tying a plastic bag to her belt, preparing for what Victoria would learn was her daily routine. I go out early, Sam explained. Before the good spots are taken. Good spots. For cans, bottles, sometimes food. You'd be surprised what people throw away.
Victoria hesitated. Can he come?
Sam blinked in surprise, then shrugged. Sure.
Just stick close.
They stepped out into the chilly morning.
The street were still wet, puddle glinting like broken mirror.
Sam led them down a narrow path under the overpass, where graffiti coated the walls and the occasional mattress lay abandoned. They passed other makeshift shelters, cardboard boxes, tents, tarps strung between fences.
The city est invisible underbelly. Why do you live here?
Victoria asked quietly. Sam kicked a rock. We used to have a place. Mom worked at a grocery store, but after her knees got bad, she couldn't stand for long. No insurance, so she lost the job. We tried shelters, but they're crowded, and sometimes worse than the street. Victoria nodded, her throat tightening. At a dumpster behind a small diner, Sam paused. She looked around cautiously, then lifted the lid. Inside were bags of discarded bread, pastries slightly smushed but still edible. Sam fished out a few wrapped sandwiches and tucked them into her bag. Most places toss food just before it expires. Doesn't mean it's bad. They continued down an alley where Sam greeted an elderly man wrapped in a sleeping bag. She handed him one of the sandwiches and a bottle of water from her bag. He smiled, revealing missing teeth, and mumbled a thank you. Victoria watched, stunned. You don't have much, but you still give.
Sam shrugged.
He's older. I'm fast. I'll find more. The simplicity of the answer struck Victoria harder than any speech or charity gala she'd ever attended. By mid-morning, their bag was half full of cans and plastic bottles, food salvaged from bins, and even a slightly torn sweater Sam found in a donation pile outside a church. They returned to the trailer, where Sam sorted the recyclables, rinsed them out, and packed them into crates. We sell them to Mr. Delgado. He owns a junkyard near here. Not much, but enough for meds or electricity.
Victoria sat on a cratte, watching.
She felt utterly useless, a burden in a world where survival was an everyday equation. In her world, problems were solved with wire transfers. Here, they were solved with scraped knees, scavenged food, and sheer resilience. How long have you been doing this? She asked. Since I was 10, Sam replied. At first I hated it. Now it's just life. Victoria was silent. The weight of Sam's words settled on her chest like a stone. Later that afternoon, Sam's mother woke. Her face lit up weakly when she saw Victoria. I heard you saved my daughter, she said, her voice raspy. I think it's the other way around, Victoria said softly. They shared a meal, bread, peanut butter, and a can of beans warmed over the hot plate. It was meager, but Sam laughed, and for a moment, the air felt lighter. That night, Victoria couldn't sleep. The events of the past 2 days swirled in her mind. The assault, the fear, the hunger, the kindness of a girl who had every reason to be hardened by life, yet wasn't. She thought of her company. If she didn't make it back in time, Elliot would take over. He'd been angling for it for years, masking ambition with loyalty. And if she didn't appear at the emergency board meeting, it would confirm his claims that she had lost control, over the company, over herself. She needed to act. The next morning, she asked Sam if there was a place nearby to buy a phone. There's a pawn shop a few blocks from here, Sam said. They've got old ones. Nothing fancy, but they work. Sam offered to take her, and once again, Victoria found herself following a 13-year-old girl through the backstreets of the city. Inside the pawn shop, the air was stale with dust and desperation. Behind the glass counter were electronics from another decade, flip phones, cracked screens, tangled cords. Victoria picked the least damaged one. $50, the clerk said, barely glancing up. Victoria opened her coat, remembering she had nothing. She turned to Sam, who was already fishing out a wad of crumpled bills from her backpack. Wait, no, Victoria said quickly.
I can't let you.
It's fine, Sam interrupted. I was saving for Mom's meds, but you need to get back.
You gotta fix whatever you left behind, right?
Victoria stared at her, stunned by the generosity, by the clarity in those young eyes. She wanted to argue, to insist, but she also knew that without help, she might never find her way back. She took the phone. Back at the trailer, Victoria charged it, her fingers trembling as she turned it on. The screen lit up, dim and scratched, but functional. She had no contacts, no access to her cloud. Just a number pad, blinking.
And a single memory.
A friend she hadn't spoken to in years.
Linda.
They'd studied together at Columbia. Linda had gone into venture capital. If she still had the same number. She dialed.
The phone rings.
Twice. Then a voice. Hello.
Victoria closed her eyes, uprising. Linda, it's Victoria. I need your help.
Linda's voice on the other end of the line brought a wave of unexpected emotion crashing down on Victoria. It had been nearly 6 years since their last conversation, but the familiarity of that soft, skeptical tone felt like a lifeline.
Victoria? I'm sorry, your voice sounds different. Are you all right?
Victoria swallowed. Her mouth was dry. She looked around the cramped trailer, at Sam stacking empty cans into crates, at the frail silhouette of Sam's mother lying beneath a thin blanket. I've had a rough few days, she said, forcing calm into her voice.
I lost my phone, my wallet.
Got mugged.
I'm in Chicago.
I need
a favor.
There was silence on the line for a moment, and then Linda's voice came again, cautious but concerned.
What kind of favor?
I need some cash. Just enough to get me back to New York and to make it through a board meeting I can't miss. I have no access to my accounts right now, and I can't explain everything over the phone, but I'll repay you the moment I get back.
Another pause.
Victoria could almost hear Linda weighing the request, the hesitation tightening like a noose. I don't know, Vic. My husband's been clear about not mixing finances with old friends, especially after what happened with his brother. We've had issues.
You understand. Victoria closed her eyes. Linda, please. You know me.
I did. Once, Linda replied, her voice fading. I'm sorry. I hope things work out for you. The line went dead. Victoria stared at the screen. The silence in the trailer pressed in around her. She didn't realize her hand was shaking until Sam placed a small cup of instant coffee beside her. She said no. Sam asked. Victoria nodded, trying to smile, but her throat burned.
It's all right.
She was an old friend. Sam sat down across from her. You ever think maybe rich people are lonelier than the rest of us? Victoria looked up, surprised. Why would you say that? Because when we don't have stuff, at least we've got each other. You had everything, but no one showed up for you. It wasn't meant as cruelty. Sam's tone was soft, almost apologetic. But the truth of it landed hard. Victoria thought back to all the galas, the speaking events, the fundraisers she had hosted. The guest lists filled with powerful names. The endless toasts. How many of those people would pick up the phone for her now? The number, clearly, was close to 0. I need to try something else, she muttered. She sat down with the borrowed notebook Sam had offered and scribbled out a plan. If she could get online, send an email to her assistant back at the New York office or reach her CFO, someone could verify her identity. Maybe wire her enough money to get home. But the problem was still the same.
No email access.
No accounts synced. The phone she now held was a glorified calculator, incapable of anything beyond texting and calling. She needed an internet connection. Sam looked up from her crate. There's a guy who runs an internet cafe a few blocks away.
Real old school.
His machines barely run, but it's cheap. He lets me do my schoolwork sometimes.
Can you take me there?
Sure. It's safe. Mostly. That afternoon, they walked the distance to a crumbling building tucked between two boarded-up storefronts. The windows were dusty, the neon sign above blinking erratically, Net Zone. Inside, the air smelled of old furniture and cigarette smoke. 4 ancient desktop computers lined the walls. A balding man in a ripped cardigan glanced up from a chess game on his screen. $1 an hour, he grunted.
Pay up front.
Victoria looked at Sam, who gave her a small nod and stepped forward, placing a crumpled dollar bill on the counter. The man gestured lazily.
Machine in the corner. Victoria sat down, the seat creaking under her.
The keyboard was sticky, and the screen flickered like a dying light bulb. Still, she logged in.
The whole browser groaned to life.
She opened her email, heart racing, fingers trembling as she typed. The message was addressed to Rachel Lee, her longtime CFO, the one person she trusted more than anyone in her executive circle. She explained her situation briefly but clearly, the mugging, the lost ID, the urgency of the board meeting. She gave Sam's address for mail delivery and included the prepaid cell number she now carried.
Please, Rachel, I need this.
Just enough to get back.
Everything else can wait.
She hit send. The cafe owner barked, "Time's up." 5 minutes later. They walked back in silence. The sky had begun to darken again, low clouds rolling in with the promise of more rain.
Back at the trailer, Victoria sat staring at the phone.
It didn't ring that night. Nor did it the next morning. She checked again. No messages. No missed calls. Her stomach twisted. Sam did her best to distract her, insisting they go collect more bottles, and for a while, Victoria joined her, trying to lose herself in the rhythm of movement. They greeted the same homeless man by the bridge. They picked through the same alleyways. But the sense of purpose that had carried her the day before was fading. When they returned that afternoon, Sam's mother was curled in pain, her legs swollen, her breathing shallow. "She's getting worse," Sam whispered. "She hasn't had her meds in 3 days."
Victoria felt the panic rise again. The money from Linda hadn't come.
No one from the company had called. She had no cash, no cards, no resources. "I'll figure something out," she said. "Just hang on." But how? Later that evening, as dusk set in, a thought crept into her mind, one she hated but couldn't ignore. What if the company didn't want her back? What if Elliot was already moving forward with the takeover? What if the narrative now painted her as negligent, unstable, even missing? And what if her silence only confirmed those suspicions? Her entire legacy, her years of work, her identity, dissolving, all because of 3 days and one violent moment on a bus. And still, the phone didn't ring. By midnight, Victoria was sitting alone outside the trailer, wrapped in her coat, staring up at the murky sky.
The city lights blurred behind her tears.
Sam came out, holding a small blanket and 2 cups of tea. "She's sleeping," the girl said, sitting beside her.
She's strong.
"Like you."
Victoria shook her head. I'm not strong.
"I built an empire, and I couldn't survive 3 days without it." "Maybe it's not about surviving alone," Sam said, handing her the tea. "Maybe it's about seeing who you are without everything you think makes you special." Victoria stared at her, the words echoing louder than any speech she'd ever given. In that moment, a new kind of strength stirred inside her, not the corporate confidence she wore like armor, but something raw and real. The kind of strength that comes only when you're stripped bare. She took a sip of the tea. It was weak, slightly bitter. But it was warm. And it was shared. The third morning dawned colder than the previous 2.
Fog clung low over the canal, blanketing the makeshift shelters in silence.
Inside the trailer, Victoria sat with her arms wrapped tightly around her knees, listening to the shallow, uneven breathing of Sam's mother. Her face had grown more pale overnight. The swelling in her legs had worsened, and she barely spoke.
Victoria had barely slept.
Each hour that passed without word from Rachel or anyone at the company pressed on her like a weight she could no longer carry. Her email might have gone unnoticed. Or worse, ignored. Sam moved quietly around the trailer, folding scraps of old newspaper into makeshift insulation for the drafty window. Her face was stoic, but Victoria could see the worry in her eyes. "I'll go check the mailbox," Sam said suddenly, as if willing a miracle into existence. Victoria nodded, though she had long given up hope. The address she'd given in the email was barely legitimate, just a scribbled number on the side of a mailbox nailed to a leaning pole beside the junkyard. She doubted it even received mail regularly. Sam threw on her hoodie and slipped out the door. Victoria watched her disappear into the fog, the girl's footsteps fading into the quiet. She turned back toward the sick woman in the corner. "Just a little longer," she whispered. "Help is coming." But even she wasn't sure anymore. Nearly an hour passed. Victoria had begun pacing when she heard footsteps on the wooden steps outside the trailer. Then Sam burst through the door, breathless, her cheeks flushed from the cold and from something else, excitement. "You got something," she said, holding up a manila envelope, sealed and stamped. Her hands trembled as she offered it forward. It came. Victoria grabbed it, tearing open the top with shaky fingers. Inside was a folded note and a thick stack of crisp bills. She unfolded the note first.
Victoria,
"I saw your email. I wasn't sure at first if it was real. But then I remembered what you told me once, never send a message unless it matters.
you matred. You stido.
Here's $500 in cash. More can come if you need. But I hope this gets you home. Rachel."
Victoria's eyes blurred with tears.
Her breath caught as relief and gratitude surged through her in waves. She held the letter close to her chest for a moment, then looked at Sam, who was beaming. "It's enough," she said. "We can do this." The next hour was a rush of movement and purpose. Victoria took a portion of the money and gave it to Sam with specific instructions: go to the pharmacy, get your mother's medication, and food, real food. Sam nodded and darted out the door. Victoria used the remaining cash to buy herself a clean outfit from the thrift store up the road. A plain black coat, a cotton blouse, slacks, and worn but serviceable shoes. She no longer looked like the woman who had fallen asleep on the cold floor of a trailer. But she wasn't the same woman who had once stepped off a private jet either. She was something in between.
Stripped down.
Rebuilt. When Sam returned, her mother had already begun to stir. With a half smile, she drank water, took her first dose of medication in days, and thanked Victoria in a raspy whisper. "You're not just helping us," she said.
You're saving us.
"No," Victoria replied.
You saved me first.
That evening, they sat together around a small camp stove as Sam prepared something resembling stew from canned vegetables and rice. For the first time since the mugging, Victoria felt warmth that came from more than just food or shelter. It came from the closeness, the quiet company of people who had accepted her without question, without judgment. The next morning, Victoria packed her things. There wasn't much, just the second-hand outfit, the phone, Rachel's note, and the remaining cash. She had already looked up the nearest bus station. If she left by noon, she could be in New York by the following morning, just in time for the board meeting. But leaving wasn't easy. She stood by the door of the trailer, her hand on the frame, as Sam sat quietly beside her mother.
You'll be okay?
Victoria asked. Sam nodded. We've been through worse. Victoria reached into her coat pocket and pressed a smaller envelope into Sam's hand. It's not much, but it'll help with food and rent for a while.
I'll be back soon.
I promise. Sam looked up, her eyes uncertain. People don't usually come back. I'm not most people, Victoria said softly. You'll see. She stepped outside. The fog had begun to lift, revealing the city's grimy edges and harsh contrasts. She hailed a cab and took one last look at the trailer, at the little home that had given her shelter, dignity, and, most unexpectedly, clarity. At the bus station, she bought a ticket with cash. As she waited, she stared at the screen of her battered phone, drafting a speech in her mind. She wasn't sure what the board would say, how much damage had already been done, or whether Elliot had managed to seize control. But she knew what she would say when she walked into that room. She would tell them that sometimes, the most valuable assets aren't listed on a spreadsheet. That sometimes, what defines a leader isn't the size of her portfolio, but the strength of her humanity. And above all, she would keep the promise she'd made. She would come back for Sam and her mother. Not out of obligation, but because she needed to. The bus pulled up, brakes hissing, doors swinging open with a sigh. Victoria climbed aboard and took a seat by the window. The engine roared to life, and as the city began to slip away behind her, she pulled Rachel's note from her pocket and read it one more time.
You m'aide. You stido.
For the first time in days, she believed it. The sun had not yet risen over Manhattan when the bus hissed to a stop in front of the Port Authority terminal. The city was stirring, but the cold air still held the hush of early morning. Victoria Langston stepped off the bus into the brisk wind, clutching her borrowed coat tighter. She hadn't slept, not really. The night ride had been a blur of thoughts, strategies, fears, and rehearsed explanations that looped over and over in her head. She didn't go home. There wasn't time. The emergency board meeting was scheduled for 9 a.m., and the headquarters of Langston Labs was still 15 blocks away. Her phone, a battered flip model she kept checking compulsively, had not received any calls. No texts.
No warning.
She had no idea what she was walking into. As she stepped into a cab, she caught her reflection in the window. She looked ordinary. Not the poised, commanding executive featured in Forbes or speaking on CNBC, but a woman with tired eyes, hair pulled back with an elastic she borrowed from Sam, and a look of fierce, quiet determination. When she arrived at the towering glass building that bore her name, the security guard at the front desk froze for a second before quickly recovering. Ms. Langston, he said, uncertain. We, weren't sure you were coming.
Victoria forçait d'un ode.
Let the board know I'll be there in 5 minutes. She walked past marble columns and high ceilings that had once felt like extensions of herself. Now, every step she took reverberated not with grandeur, but with urgency. Upstairs, the boardroom was already half full. 12 directors, some long-time allies, some recent additions with agendas of their own, sat in silence. At the head of the table, occupying the seat that should have been hers, was Elliot Grant. He looked up when she entered, and for a moment, his face betrayed the smallest flicker of shock. But it was quickly replaced by a smug, composed smile. Victoria, he said, standing as if in welcome. We weren't sure you'd make it. I almost didn't, she replied calmly. But I don't intend to miss the meeting where my company is stolen from under me. A ripple of tension moved through the room. Elliot gestured to the empty chair beside him.
Shall we begin?
Victoria didn't sit. Instead, she reached into her bag and withdrew a stack of printed emails, including Rachel's forwarded messages, the record of her wire transfer, and a brief statement prepared by her attorney, whom she had managed to reach briefly that morning via a borrowed laptop in a coffee shop. "Before we discuss any votes or motions," she said, her voice steady, "I want the record to show that I was the victim of a premeditated mugging. One that occurred just 24 hours before this board was scheduled to convene. My bag, phone, ID, all stolen. My access to communication was completely cut off." One of the older board members leaned forward. "Do you have proof of that?" "I do," she said, handing the documents to the assistant seated nearby. "And more importantly, I have evidence that the mugging may not have been random." Elliot scoffed. "Now that's reaching."
Victoria's eyes maze.
"Is it? Because I find it rather interesting that an emergency vote to reassign my executive authority was pushed forward by you while I was conveniently off the grid. And further, I have a copy of a conversation, overheard by someone on our staff, that indicates your contact with a third-party firm known for providing, let's say, unconventional services." She nodded toward the door. A young woman entered, a paralegal from her attorney's office, and placed a flash drive on the table. "It's all here," Victoria continued. "Enough to launch an internal investigation, at the very least." The room fell silent. The air thickened with shifting glances and unspoken questions. Elliot stood, face tense. "You expect us to believe that after disappearing without explanation for 3 days, you just happened to reappear with exactly the right documents and just enough drama to reclaim your seat?" "I don't expect you to believe anything," Victoria said. "But I expect you to look at the facts. And I expect you to recognize that leadership isn't about who sits in this room when things are convenient. It's about who comes back, no matter how broken, to fight for what's right." She stepped forward now, taking her place at the head of the table, not asking, not hesitating. "This company wasn't built by shortcuts. It wasn't built by people like you, Elliot, who think power is a prize to snatch the moment someone trips. It was built by grit, by hard work, and yes, by the people who are easy to overlook. And right now, this company needs more than strategy. It needs integrity." The silence held for a long moment. Then one of the board members cleared his throat. "I move to dismiss any action taken in the last 48 hours regarding leadership reassignment." "I second," another voice said. Elliot's face darkened, his eyes flitting from face to face, looking for an ally. None met his gaze. The vote passed. Victoria remained chairwoman and CEO. An internal review of Elliot's conduct was unanimously approved. He stood without a word and left the room. After the meeting, Victoria didn't linger. She declined press interviews. She ignored the photographers camped outside the lobby. She took the service elevator down and exited through the rear alley, her mind already on something far from boardrooms and business. She pulled out her phone and texted Rachel. "It worked. Thank you.
You owe you everything."
Then she opened the weathered notebook Sam had given her, flipping to the page where she'd written down the trailer's address in Chicago. She booked a return trip that night. The Empire was safe. But that wasn't the victory she cared about anymore. She had a promise to keep. Victoria stepped off the train in Chicago just as the last light of day faded into a smoky blue dusk. The city looked the same, gray buildings rising like tired giants, the same cold air that bit at her cheeks, but everything felt different now. She no longer moved like a lost woman. She walked with purpose, boots scuffing against the sidewalk, coat pulled snug against the wind. Her thoughts raced ahead of her steps. It had been only 4 days since she left Sam and her mother in that trailer, but it felt like a lifetime. She had fought for her company, reclaimed her name, and revealed the rot that had threatened to take it all. And yet, as triumphant as her return to the boardroom had been, it wasn't the marble floors of Langston Labs she missed. It was the sound of Sam's laughter echoing in that cramped trailer. The quiet strength in her mother's voice. The unexpected sense of belonging. She reached the edge of the junkyard just as the street lamps flickered on. The trailers still lined the canal, their metal sides rusting beneath graffiti and weather. She made her way to the one with the crooked number 12 spray-painted on the door.
Chicknocked, at-tu digne?
No answer.
Chicknocked again. Still nothing.
A sinking feeling bloomed in her chest. She turned to leave when a woman poked her head out from a neighboring trailer. "You looking for the girl and her mom?" the woman asked. Yes, Victoria said quickly.
Samantha.
And her mother. They left this morning.
Sommequin of emergency.
The mother looked real sick. Said they were going to county hospital.
Victoria's briscogt.
Did they say which one?
The woman shrugged.
Not sure. Probably St. Joseph's. It's the only place that doesn't turn folks away. Victoria nodded her thanks and turned back toward the street. She flagged down a cab, urgency rising in her chest.
Chiadente comme oldis ou tout bitoulette.
At St. Joseph's, she moved quickly through the cold, sterile corridors, asking for Samantha Rivera. A nurse checked a clipboard, then led her to the third floor. The room was small, lit with harsh overhead fluorescence. Sam sat in a plastic chair by the hospital bed, her chin resting on her knees. Her mother lay beneath thin sheets, eyes closed, for line trailing from her arm. Sam looked up when Victoria entered. Her eyes widened in disbelief. "You came back," she whispered. Victoria stepped forward, her voice catching. "Of course I did." Sam stood slowly, and for a long moment, neither of them spoke. Then Sam wrapped her arms around Victoria's waist and held her tightly, as if afraid she might vanish again. "She got worse yesterday," Sam said. "The meds helped, but they weren't enough. Her legs gave out this morning. I didn't know what to do." "You did exactly what you should," Victoria said. "You got her help." Sam pulled back, wiping her face with the sleeve of her hoodie. "I used the rest of the money. I'm sorry." "Don't ever apologize for taking care of your mother." A doctor entered then, glancing between them. "You family?" he asked Victoria. "Yes," she answered without hesitation. He nodded, flipping through a chart. "She's stable for now, but she'll need a proper treatment plan. She's dealing with long-term complications from untreated rheumatoid arthritis. We're talking regular medication, physical therapy, and a much better living situation." "I'll take care of it," Victoria said. The doctor raised an eyebrow, but said nothing more. After he left, Victoria sat beside the bed, holding the frail woman's hand. Her skin was paper-thin, warm but fragile. Sam sat on the other side, silent, eyes focused on the rhythm of the heart monitor. That night, Victoria booked a hotel room nearby and brought Sam with her. It was nothing extravagant, she wanted to avoid attention, but to Sam, it might as well have been a 5-star palace.
"You're serious?"
Sam asked as they stepped into the modest but clean suite.
"Dead serious. You're not sleeping in a trailer tonight."
Sam explored the space like a child seeing Disneyland for the first time. She ran her fingers over the soft bedspread, opened the minibar and gasped at the tiny cans of soda, marveled at the view of the city lights from the window. Victoria watched her, a lump in her throat. Over the next 3 days, they returned to the hospital daily. Sam's mother slowly improved, regaining her strength enough to speak more clearly. She insisted on thanking Victoria every time she visited, her voice still thin but her eyes filled with something stronger than gratitude, trust. On the 4th day, as they walked down the hospital corridor, Victoria turned to Sam. "I've been thinking." Sam looked up. "You and your mom need more than just medicine.
You need a home.
Stability. Safety."
Sames face darkened slightly.
"We've tried shelters. Most are full. And we can't afford rent." "I'm not talking about a shelter," Victoria said. "I've already arranged for a small apartment, 2 bedrooms, clean, safe, near a community clinic. I paid 3 months in advance. You'll move in as soon as your mom is discharged." Sam stopped in her tracks.
You mean, live there? Like, for real?
"Yes. For real." "But why?"
You don't owe us anything. Victoria smiled.
"Maybe not. But I want to. And besides, I made a promise."
You always keep my promise.
Sam stared at her for a moment, then threw her arms around her again. "I don't know what to say."
Don't say anything, Victoria whispered.
"Just let me help." Later that night, they visited the apartment. It was modest, 2nd floor, quiet neighborhood, a small courtyard with a few trees that had already begun to shed their autumn leaves, but to Sam, it felt like a mansion. There was a real kitchen. A bathroom with a working shower. 2 beds with fresh linens.
A spécité humming gently in the corner.
Sam ran from room to room in disbelief. Is this really ours? It is, Victoria said. And I'll make sure you have what you need to stay here. They sat on the floor of the empty living room, eating takeout and drinking juice from plastic cups. Sam looked at Victoria.
You savais du S. Victoria shook her head.
No, Sam.
You savais de me.
You were the first person to care when I had nothing. You gave me more than food. You reminded me who I was when I forgot.
Outside, the wind whispered through the trees, scattering yellow leaves across the pavement.
Inside, beneath the glow of a single lamp, two people sat on the edge of a new beginning. It wasn't charity.
It wasn't pity.
It was a promise fulfilled, and the foundation of something stronger than either of them had ever known. The new apartment was quiet that morning, filled only with the hum of the space heater and the occasional creak of the floorboards. Sam stood in the kitchen, still getting used to the idea of having one. She was boiling water on the stove, her hands trembling slightly as she reached for the instant oatmeal packets Victoria had stocked the night before. It had been 4 days since they moved in. 4 days since her mother was discharged from the hospital. 4 days of warm beds, real food, and clean clothes. But today felt different. Sam couldn't explain it. Maybe it was the way Victoria had left early that morning, saying she had a meeting with someone from the city's education office. Or maybe it was the subtle shift in Victoria's voice when she spoke about arranging Sam's enrollment, her tone crisp and efficient, more like a CEO than the woman who had once shared cold sandwiches with her under a bridge. Sam glanced toward the living room, where her mother sat wrapped in a blanket, flipping through channels with half-lidded eyes. She seemed at peace, healthier, but tired in a way that rest alone couldn't fix. The door opened. Victoria stepped in, brushing the wind from her coat. She looked different, more polished, even in her modest clothes. Her hair was tied back neatly, and she held a folder in her hand. Good news, she said, offering a smile. I spoke with someone at Northside Community School. They have an opening for you. It's a re-entry program, designed for kids who've missed time. You'd start next week. Sam forced a nod, but her stomach twisted. That's great. Victoria seemed not to notice the hesitation. She sat at the table, flipping open the folder. They'll place you in a small class. You'll get academic support, meals, even transportation if you need it. I've already paid the enrollment fee. Something about those words, already paid, made Sam's shoulders tense. You didn't ask me, she said, her voice barely audible. Victoria looked up. I thought it would be a good surprise. Sam swallowed. It's not that I'm not grateful. I am. It's just, you're deciding everything. I'm trying to help, Victoria said gently. I know. But this feels like your plan, not mine.
Victoria closed the folder slowly.
I understand you're scared.
Changisarde.
But Sam, this is a real opportunity. It could change your life. But what if I don't want it to change like this?
Sam's voice rose.
What if I don't want to be turned into some project?
Some redemption story you tell your business friends. The warden in the air like broken glass. Victoria blinked, taken aback.
Is that what you think this is? Sam stood from the table.
I don't know.
But I keep hearing you talk about plans and schools and meetings, and it's like you forgot where you were a week ago.
You forgot who you were with.
Victoria stood too, trying to keep her voice calm.
I avente forgotten anything.
That week changed me. It made me realize I needed to do something meaningful. Something you could post about on LinkedIn? Sam snapped.
Victoria froze.
Sam's hands were clenched at her sides. Her chest rose and fell in uneven breaths.
You say saved you.
But now it feels like I'm just part of a story you needed to tell yourself. So you didn't feel bad. That's not true, Victoria whispered.
Sam shook her head, blinking hard to hold back tears.
I don't want to be your charity case. I just want to be normal. I want to feel like I'm worth something because of me, not because I gave a sandwich to some rich lady having a bad day. Victoria stepped forward, her own voice cracking.
You are worth something, Samdi.
More than you know. Then let me choose my own path. Silence followed. Victoria didn't know what to say. She had come so far, done so much to make things right, but now she saw the flaw. She had approached this the way she approached everything: solve the problem, manage the crisis, take control. But Sam wasn't a crisis to manage. She was a person, a girl who had learned to survive without asking anyone for help.
A girl who gave out of instinct, not calculation.
And maybe, in trying to repay her, Victoria had trampled over the very dignity Sam had worked so hard to protect. "I'm sorry," Victoria said at last.
You're right.
"I should have asked you first. I made choices that weren't mine to make."
Sam stood there, motionless.
"I don't know if I can stay here," she said after a long pause. "I don't know if this is what we need."
Victoria's head broke.
"Then I'll respect that."
Whatever you decide.
That night, Sam packed a small bag. She didn't take much, just a change of clothes, a photo of her and her mother from a hospital, and the sketchbook Victoria had bought her during one of their outings. Her mother was asleep when she left. Victoria offered to drive her, but Sam declined. "I need to do this alone," she said. Victoria nodded. She stood in the doorway as Sam walked down the dim hallway, her footsteps soft and slow. When the door closed behind her, the apartment felt twice as empty.
Victoria sat on the couch, staring at the blank television screen.
The silence was unbearable. She had survived hostile boardrooms and ruthless takeovers, but this loss felt sharper than any corporate betrayal. For the first time in a long time, she cried.
Not out of anger.
But because she knew what it meant to care, and to get it wrong. Sam didn't return the next day.
Or the one after.
Victoria waited, giving her space, resisting the urge to call every hour. She left the apartment untouched, in case Sam came back. She kept the folder with the school information on the table, unopened. And each night before going to bed, she whispered into the quiet, "Please come back. On your terms.
When you're ready."
The days passed slowly, each one stretching longer than the last. Victoria returned to her office in New York for a short time, but her heart was never quite in the boardroom. Her team noticed the shift. She still led meetings, still gave direction, but the sharp edge that once defined her presence had softened. At night, in her penthouse overlooking the city skyline, she would lie awake, staring at the ceiling. The luxury surrounding her felt empty.
The silence échoait tout l'oubli.
She called the Chicago apartment every evening. She left voicemails for Sam, texts that went unanswered. She had no idea where the girl had gone, whether she was safe. She called the hospital.
The shelter. Even the junkyard trailer park.
No one had seen her. On the 6th day, as rain poured down over Manhattan in heavy sheets, Victoria stood by her office window, watching droplets streak the glass like falling stars. She held Sam's sketchbook in her hands, flipping through its pages. There were drawings of trees, buildings, cityscapes. But tucked between them, barely noticeable, was a small charcoal sketch of two figures sitting under an awning in the rain. One of them was handing the other a sandwich. The taller figure, clearly Victoria, was drawn slumped and weary. But the smaller one, Sam, had a faint light sketched around her head. A glow.
Hello, almost.
Victoria closed the book and grabbed her coat. She didn't tell anyone she was leaving. The rain was relentless in Chicago when she arrived that night, sweeping in sideways from Lake Michigan, flooding gutters and soaking the city in gray. She went straight to the apartment. It was still empty.
Everything untouched.
But as she stood there in the center of the living room, a thought struck her, an old memory from their earliest conversation. "I hang out under the Roosevelt Bridge sometimes," Sam had once told her. "There's this spot where it doesn't leak."
Qu'un damaille qui place.
Victoria had thought nothing of it then. But now, it was the only lead she had. She left the apartment and hailed a cab, asking the driver to take her to the Roosevelt Bridge. He gave her a strange look but nodded.
The bridge loomed dark and massive over the edge of the canal.
Water dripped from its steel ribs in rhythmic taps. The streets nearby were nearly deserted, the kind of place the city forgot. She stepped out of the cab into ankle-deep water, pulling her coat tight, shielding her eyes from the downpour. She walked under the bridge, past abandoned shopping carts and rusted-out bikes, until she saw it. A small figure, sitting alone on a pile of folded cardboard, her hoodie pulled up, arms wrapped around her knees. "Sam," Victoria called softly, almost unsure it was her. The girl turned, startled. Her face was pale, wet from the rain, but unmistakable. She stared at Victoria for a long moment, as if trying to decide whether to run or stay. I thought you forgot, she finally said.
Victoria shook her head. He could never forget.
She stepped closer but didn't sit, not yet.
I've been looking for you.
Sam looked away. I just needed space.
Time to think.
Victoria nodded.
I understand. The rain pattered above them, steady and unrelenting. Sam glanced over, her voice barely louder than the wind.
I felt like I didn't belong in that apartment. Like it was someone else's life. It was yours, Victoria said. I didn't know how to help without taking over. Sam looked up, eyes sharp. You were trying to fix me. I was trying to give you what I thought you needed, Victoria admitted.
But I forgot to ask what you wanted.
They sat in silence for a while. A car rumbled overhead, its lights casting flickers on the wet concrete. I've spent my whole life fixing things, Victoria said eventually. Building, solving, controlling. But when you gave me that sandwich, you didn't ask what I could offer. You just helped. Sam's expression shifted, softening. I wasn't trying to teach you anything, she said. I know, Victoria replied. And that's why it meant more than anything. The rain began to slow, just a little. Victoria reached into her bag and pulled out the sketchbook. I kept this, she said, handing it over. I think you're an artist, Sam. And I think the world needs to see what you see. Sam ran her fingers over the cover, then opened it slowly. You're not mad I left? She asked. No, Victoria said. I was scared. But never mad. I needed you to come back because you chose to. Not because I asked. Sam stared at the sketch of them under the awning. I thought I ruined everything. You didn't ruin anything, Victoria said. You reminded me that love isn't about saving someone. It's about standing beside them.
Even in the rain.
Sam looked up, her eyes glossy. Do you still want me to go to that school? Only if you want to, Victoria said. Sam hesitated.
I'm scared I won't be good enough. I've been scared too, Victoria whispered.
But being scared doesn't mean you shouldn't try. It just means it matters. Sam reached out, and Victoria took her hand. It was cold, small, and strong. I want to try, Sam said quietly. But this time, can we do it together? Victoria smiled, the warmth spreading through her chest like sunlight through storm clouds. Together, she said. Always. They sat there under the bridge, two figures surrounded by the remnants of storms past and present. But the air between them had changed. It was lighter, clearer. Redemption didn't come with trumpets or declarations. It came in the quiet moments, when walls were lowered, when hearts spoke plainly, when forgiveness met humility. The rain slowed to a drizzle, and then slowly, stopped altogether. The days after the rain were quieter, but they were not still. Back in the small apartment, life began to find a rhythm, not perfect, not always smooth but real. Sam had returned with new resolve, and though words were few in those early days, her presence filled the space in a way that told Victoria everything she needed to know. Sam was trying. She got up earlier, helped her mother with breakfast, took short walks to the neighborhood clinic to ask about care schedules. Victoria didn't press her about school or art or the internship anymore. Instead, she simply made space, for silence, for questions, for choice. Then one morning, over black coffee and toast, Sam looked up and said, I think I'm ready. Victoria paused.
Ready for what?
Sam smiled faintly. To go back. To the school. Maybe just for a visit. Victoria nodded, hiding the flood of emotion behind a calm sip. Okay.
We'll go tomorrow.
The next day, they returned to Northside Community School. The halls were filled with the same quiet energy, students chatting by lockers, teachers greeting one another with familiar warmth. This time, Sam didn't walk 2 steps behind.
She walked beside Victoria, eyes open.
Ms. Reyes welcomed them back without surprise, as if she had known Sam would return all along. Still got your spot, she said with a grin.
And your locker, if you want it. Sam looked under her breath, the sound like glass catching sunlight.
They toured the classrooms again, but this time, Sam took notes. Asked questions. She lingered longer at the art room, staring at a mural in progress along the back wall. It showed a phoenix rising from a storm cloud, painted by a student who, like Sam, had once dropped out. When they left the school that afternoon, Sam had a registration form in her hand and a backpack filled with new supplies. Victoria didn't say much on the walk back, but inside, her heart beat with a kind of pride she had never known, one that wasn't tied to business success or public approval, but to the quiet courage of a girl who refused to give up. The following Monday, Sam started school. The first day was hard.
The second, a little less.
By the end of the week, she had already connected with 2 classmates, one of whom also lived with a sick parent and understood, without explanation, the way Sam sometimes drifted into silence. In the evenings, Sam studied at the kitchen table, her sketchbook always nearby. When she didn't understand something, she asked. When she stumbled, she tried again. Each moment of struggle was also a moment of strength. Victoria kept her distance during school hours, but she was never far. She checked in with Ms. Reyes, offered to volunteer, and eventually, at Sam's suggestion, began hosting small workshops on entrepreneurship and creative branding for students interested in art and design. That was how the seed for the internship program was planted. Within weeks, a proposal formed. Langston Labs would partner with Northside to launch a pilot internship for 2 students per semester. The goal wasn't just exposure to the workplace, but mentorship, encouragement, and when possible, pathways to employment. Sam was the first intern. On her first day at the Langston Labs office, she wore a dark blue blouse and a pair of khaki pants Victoria had helped her pick out. Her shoes were still a little scuffed, but her chin was high, and her sketchbook was tucked securely under one arm.
Victoria Meyer in the lobby, Bimain.
You ready? Sam grinned.
Let's do this.
She was introduced to the creative department, given a workspace near the junior designers, and matched with Kara, a soft-spoken but fiercely talented brand specialist who took Sam under her wing. Victoria didn't hover. She let Sam find her own way. And Sam did. She asked thoughtful questions. She listened, observed, absorbed. She started helping with concept mock-ups, color palettes, layout sketches. And slowly, she began offering her own ideas, timidly at first, then with growing confidence. One afternoon, she stayed late to finish a proposed layout for a new skincare product. When the team saw it the next day, Kara brought it straight to Victoria. She has an eye, she said. And not just for design. For story. Victoria didn't say much. She just smiled and nodded. Because she already knew. At home, Sam's mother was regaining her strength. Physical therapy sessions, medication, and steady care had done what no emergency room ever could, give her a path forward. She cooked more often now, read magazines, even joked with Victoria over coffee. They had become something like a family, an unconventional one, but rooted in something deeper than blood. Trust. Respect. Shared struggle. One evening, as the city lights blinked on and the world softened into twilight, Sam and Victoria sat together on the small apartment balcony. Sam flipped through her latest sketchbook, pausing at a page that showed 3 figures, drawn in warm earth tones, surrounded by tall buildings and distant trees. One was standing behind a podium. One was seated in a wheelchair. One stood in the background, hand outstretched. I've been working on something, Sam said. Victoria looked at the sketch.
What is it?
A campaign, Sam said. Not for a product. For a message. About rising from where you started, and choosing where you want to go.
Victoria's eyes lingeaient on the drawing.
And what do you want to do with it? She asked. Sam closed the book. Tell it. Share it. Help others like me believe they can write their own story too. Victoria nodded. Then let's make it happen. The chapter wasn't over. It was just beginning. It had been almost a year since that stormy night under the Roosevelt Bridge, the night Victoria Langston's life took a turn she could never have predicted. Seasons had shifted. Time had passed. But what remained was a bond that neither hardship nor time could undo. Sam stood in front of the auditorium mirror, smoothing the collar of her button-up shirt. It wasn't anything fancy, just crisp, clean, and chosen by her. She looked at her reflection, barely recognizing the girl from a year ago, the girl in second-hand sneakers, avoiding eye contact, living moment to moment. Now, she looked like someone ready to step into the light. The auditorium behind her was beginning to fill. Parents, faculty, community leaders, all gathering for the annual Langston Labs Youth Initiative Showcase, a new tradition born from a simple idea: open the door, and let those who've never been invited walk through. Sam had been chosen to speak at this year's event. The keynote speaker, they'd said. Her palms were sweating. Outside the dressing room, Victoria waited by the stage entrance, her arms folded across her chest, pride swelling behind her calm expression. She wore her signature black blazer, but there was nothing cold or distant in her presence. She was no longer just the CEO, but a mentor, a friend, a guardian, in all the ways that mattered. When Sam stepped out, their eyes met.
You look ready, Victoria said.
I feel ready, Sam replied. Well, almost. Victoria chuckled.
A little nerveux.
Sam nodded. A lot nervous.
Victoria touched her shoulder.
That's good. It means what you're about to say matters. Sam took a deep breath. Thank you.
For everything. Victoria shook her head.
You're the one who gave this all meaning. I just showed up when I was supposed to. They stood in silence for a moment, listening as the MC introduced Sam. A light buzz filled the air, the kind of anticipation that lives between the pause and the first word. Go show them who you are, Victoria whispered. Sam stepped onto the stage. The lights were warm and bright. She blinked at the rows of faces looking back at her. Somewhere in the front row, her mother sat, her hands clasped tight in her lap, her eyes already glossy with tears. Sam reached the microphone. She cleared her throat. Hi. I'm Samantha Rivera, she began. But some people here just call me Sam. A year ago, I wouldn't have imagined I'd be standing here. To be honest, a year ago, I wasn't imagining much of anything.
Just getting through the day.
She paused. I used to think people like me didn't belong in places like this. Not because anyone told me that directly, but because no one ever told me I did.
A soft murmure moved through the crowd.
I didn't grow up in a house with books or hot meals every night.
I grew up learning how to listen for danger.
How to find food in places most people avoid. I learned that being invisible could sometimes be safer than being seen. She looked down briefly, then back up. And then I met someone. Someone who wasn't supposed to need anything. She was rich, successful, powerful. But she was alone. And in that moment, she needed something only I could give. The room was completely still. I shared a sandwich. It wasn't much. Probably stale. But I didn't give it to earn anything. I gave it because I understood what it felt like to be hungry.
To be forgotten.
She smiled. I thought that moment was small. But it turned out to be the biggest thing I'd ever done. Because that sandwich started everything. She turned, gesturing toward Victoria in the wings. That woman sitting there didn't just help me get into school. She didn't just give me a place to stay or a job or new clothes. She gave me something bigger, dignity. A voice.
A second chance.
Victoria looked down, blinking rapidly. But here's the thing I want everyone to understand, Sam continued. She didn't save me. We saved each other. Murmurs of agreement rippled through the crowd. She reminded me that where you start doesn't define where you can go. And I reminded her that sometimes, even the strongest need someone to see them. Sam paused. So today, I'm not here to inspire you with a story about how I escaped poverty. I'm here to tell you what's possible when we look at each other and ask, what can I learn from you? Instead of what can I fix?
Applause rose slowly, then aux latons.
Sam stepped back from the mic, heart pounding, cheeks flushed. As she walked off stage, Victoria was waiting.
No word, juste un embrasse.
You were brilliant, she whispered. I meant every word. I know. Later that night, the two of them sat outside on a quiet bench, away from the noise of the reception. The stars peeked through the city haze, and the air smelled faintly of summer grass. Sam looked up.
Isti carry that sandwich memory with me. Victoria smiled.
Me too. And I've been thinking, when I graduate, maybe I don't want to just be a designer. Oh. I want to start something.
A foundation, maybe.
Help kids like me. But not just with food or housing, with the tools to tell their own stories. To draw. To write. To build. Victoria turned to her, eyes full of quiet fire. I think that's the most powerful thing you could do.
Jude help me. With everything you've got.
They sat in silence again, not because there was nothing left to say, but because the space between them was full of understanding. A full year had passed. But in that moment, they were still the same two souls who found each other in the rain. Only now, they had light.
And direction.
And purpose. As they walked home, the street lamps flickered on one by one. A city still humming, still broken in places, still full of people who didn't know how close they were to their own turning point. But some would find it. Maybe with a sandwich. Maybe with a story. Maybe with someone who saw them, not for what they lacked, but for all they carried inside. Because sometimes, the smallest act can open the largest door. And sometimes, the ones we try to save end up saving us right back.